Okay, picture this. Imagine a country that is sitting on the largest proven oil reserves in the entire world. Not second, not third, number one. A nation that not too long ago was the richest in all of South America. Now hold that thought and picture that exact same country in a state of absolute total collapse. This isn't some dystopian movie plot. This is the real, tragic story of Venezuela. I mean, just look at this. The contrast is just staggering. It's almost hard to wrap your head around. On one side, you've got the promise, right? The world's biggest oil reserves, a history of being the wealthiest nation on the continent, a democratic jewel. And on the other side, the reality. Hyperinflation hitting over 1,000,000%, millions of people fleeing for their lives, and nearly the entire population, 96%, plunged into poverty. So, this leads us to the one central question that we have to answer. How on earth does this happen? How did a nation with so much potential, which should have been a paradise, spiral into a complete nightmare? To really get it, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning. See, Venezuela's story didn't start with oil. Not at all. It starts way earlier, with a brutal but heroic struggle for freedom. It was a republic literally born in blood and fire.
For 300 years, Venezuela was a Spanish colony, and that meant 3 centuries of exploitation and slavery. But eventually, inspired by what was happening in America and France, a revolutionary fire was lit. And after more than a decade of just savage warfare, the legendary general Simón Bolívar, El Libertador, finally crushed the Spanish army and won Venezuela its freedom. But Bolívar's dream of a stable, unified South America, well, it shattered almost immediately. He died completely heartbroken, and his final words were just hauntingly prophetic. America is ungovernable. It was like he could see the future, a full century of instability, civil war, and military dictatorships that came next. The nation was free, sure, but it was a long, long way from being at peace. And then, in the early 20th century, something was discovered, deep under the ground, that would change everything, Venezuela's entire destiny. It seemed like the ultimate blessing, but it would turn out to be a terrible, terrible curse. Near Lake Maracaibo, drillers struck oil, and we're not talking about a small find. Venezuela was basically sitting on an ocean of the stuff. Suddenly, international companies swarmed in, and cash began to flood the government's bank accounts. It really looked like the answer to all of the country's problems had finally arrived. And this brings us to the key idea that explains so much of this tragedy. It's an economic paradox known as the resource curse. And it's this really bizarre, counterintuitive phenomenon where having a ton of something valuable, like oil, actually ends up destroying your country in the long run. So here's how it works. It's a 4-step trap. Step 1, you find the oil. Awesome. Step 2, the oil money is so easy, you completely forget about everything else. Your farms, your factories, your tech sector, it all just withers and dies. Step 3, your entire country's fate is now handcuffed to the wild swings of the global oil market. And then, the final, fatal step, when that price inevitably crashes, your whole house of cards just comes tumbling down. For a while, though, it really seemed to be working. I mean, the mid-20th century, and especially the 1970s, looked like a golden age for Venezuela. But all that prosperity was just an illusion. It was like a beautiful gilded cage. You have to picture the 1970s. Global oil prices went through the roof. Venezuela nationalized its entire oil industry, and the money pouring in was just staggering. The capital, Caracas, transformed into this glittering modern city full of skyscrapers and highways. A thriving middle class popped up, buying new cars, taking vacations. For a moment, Venezuela was, without a doubt, the richest kid on the block in Latin America. It looked like they'd hit the jackpot. But here's the thing. Here's the catch. That incredible wealth wasn't being used to build a real, sustainable future. Instead, a culture of just epic corruption took hold. Billions upon billions of dollars were just stolen, siphoned off by corrupt politicians and their buddies into private bank accounts. The country was rich on paper, but its foundations were rotting away from the inside. And then the party came to a screeching halt. In 1982, global oil prices collapsed. The country, which had been spending money like there was no tomorrow, was suddenly broke and drowning in debt. This forced the government to impose harsh budget cuts, which in 1989 sparked these massive, deadly riots called the Protocaso. And right in the middle of all that chaos, a young army officer named Hugo Chavez tried to lead a military coup. It failed, but suddenly,
everyone knew his name.
All of this unrest, this deep, simmering anger at the inequality, it set the stage for the final act of this tragedy. Decades of corruption and dependency were about to explode in a complete and total implosion. So Chavez gets out of prison, and he jumps into politics. He was brilliant at tapping into the very real anger of millions of poor Venezuelans who felt, correctly, that they'd been completely left behind. He came with a simple, powerful promise. I'm going to take our nation's oil wealth back from the corrupt elites and give it to you, the people. And in 1998, they elected him in a landslide. And to be fair, for a while when oil prices were high in the 2000s, he did fund these popular social programs, missions that really did expand healthcare and education for the poor. But at the exact same time, he was seizing private farms and businesses, basically destroying the country's ability to produce anything. He concentrated all the power in his own hands, tore down democratic institutions, and made the economy even more dependent on oil than it was before. Then came the perfect storm. Chavez died from cancer in 2013, leaving his hand-picked successor, Nicolas Maduro, in charge. And then, just 1 year later, 2014, global oil prices crashed. Hard. But this time, there was no safety net. There was nothing left. The entire system, this whole house of cards built on oil money, just completely disintegrated. The government's solution was to just print more and more money, which led to one of the worst cases of hyperinflation in modern history. We're talking about inflation over 1,000,000%. The money became so worthless, people literally stopped counting it. They started weighing huge stacks of cash on a scale just to buy a loaf of bread. It's insane. The economic numbers are one thing, but the human toll? That's what's truly heartbreaking. In the year 2017 alone, the average Venezuelan lost 24 pounds. Not because they were on a diet, but because of widespread starvation. There was simply no food on the shelves. And so, what do? People fled. Over 7 million Venezuelans have left their home country, creating one of the largest refugee crises on the planet. They walked across borders with literally nothing but the clothes on their backs, just to escape the hunger, the chaos, the collapse. The collapse of the society was just total. The healthcare system, gone. The country's best and brightest, its doctors, engineers, teachers, they all left. An entire generation of children now has stunted growth because of malnutrition. Violent crime exploded. Every single pillar of what makes a society function just crumbled into dust. Which leaves us with this one final, really crucial question. The story of Venezuela is just a devastating cautionary tale. It forces all of us to ask, what is a nation's true wealth? Is it the black gold under the ground, or is it something you can't touch, like the rule of law, stable institutions, a diverse economy, and just basic trust between people? Venezuela had all the oil in the world, but it lost everything else. And in the end, that's what made all the difference.